So a few days ago I saw a video with the title, "We want you to become a pagan content creator." Being thrilled by this idea, I decided to watch it, and it was at some point around the 8-minute mark that I realized I was unable to pay attention. And this is not at the fault of the content creator. This has everything to do with my crow brain being unable to engage. The reason this has caught my interest to begin with was because about a year ago I had made a video here bringing up the idea of becoming a pagan vlogger, where it's more or less, your stereotype of vlogger, but it's just a slice of life, a day in the life of somebody who is pagan, where it's not really structured or oriented around anything specific other than, I am a person, I am a pagan, here's a glimpse into my practice. And I realized I hated that idea. Something that happens in the greater social media phenomenon is that at some point, any idea, philosophy, movement, what have you, that gets to a pop culture point of view eventually loses the substance in favor for what gets clicks and views and becomes more enticing and more engaging. In doing so, it winds up forfeiting what is at the core of the values of these ideas to begin with. And I don't think that this is anybody's fault. I think this is simply the nature of the beast and what marks success and gaining traction to your page or to your YouTube, to your TikTok. There is a way to get the attention and garner the eyes of others in order to turn what you're doing into your livelihood. I want to take a look at the surface level introduction of witchcraft as it is, the way that I understand it on TikTok. There appears to be, to me, this general attitude that if you're going to make witchy and pagan content, that means that you're going to try to turn it into a source of income. And there's a way this winds up looking, which generally is making content that the algorithm favors. That way it is put in front of more eyes and you build and cultivate your audience from there. At that point, once there is enough people watching your content, you then redirect them to a link in the bio or just straight up broadcast that you have an Etsy where you are selling spell work or tarot readings, or you have a Patreon where you are giving lessons, etc., etc., etc. It looks a certain way because of the last few years has defined this to look a certain way, and this appears to be the metric for success. And by no means do I intend to shame or turn my nose up at anybody who does this and it has been successful for them. This is incredibly valid, and I don't want to discourage others if this is something that they are currently doing or something that they are currently working towards. What I'm saying is this is why I don't want to do it. This is why I have not opened an Etsy. This is why, even though I have started to make a Patreon, one of the reasons that I don't know what to put up on it is because I don't want to teach lessons and I don't want to be a teacher in this capacity. So when I take to the internet and suggest that I am having struggles with trying to make more lucrative endeavors for myself, oftentimes these are the ideas that come up. And there is nothing wrong with this. It is good, sound advice. But it also is a part of this greater metric that I do not want to embody for myself. My craft, my practice, the way that I study and the way that I research is incredibly messy. And in order to make it fit some kind of curriculum, in order to lead lessons, I would then have to make it make sense in a way that would then be easily digestible for others. And for the most part, the way that I do this on TikTok is the way that I would want to do it. I have an idea, somebody offers a jumping point through a comment, I then move forward and share my wealth of information strung together in some way that others can understand based on this point of reference over here. So in this way, I do not see myself as a teacher or an educator, although I do wind up teaching people and educating people with my content. But what I am really against is saying that this is my job, this is what I'm doing, because then I have to make it look a certain way. I have to be striving to something that is now counterintuitive to what I do and where I succeed and the skills that I excel at. However, enough about me. I want to talk about and sort of criticize the attitudes that people hold within themselves and then profess through their content that this is the way that it is, this is the way that it has to be, because this works for others, it's gonna work for you. For this, let's dial it back a ways to around the mid-19th century, so 1850s, 1860s, 1870s. Let's start there with the modern spiritualist movement and the beginning of it. Around this time, the American Civil War was going on and ending, and there were a lot of people that now had their families torn apart courtesy of the war. So being able to communicate with the unrest dead of family members on the other side became an incredible point of interest. And from this, people claimed that they had abilities to utilize divination tools such as pendulum or something that would look and resemble a Ouija board and other various types of methods so then their family members could interact with their dearly departed loved ones. And this became a business in the Reconstruction period of the Americas. The United States. The words are escaping me. I hope this is making sense. It is actually a direct product of this movement that brought us the Ouija board. Now, the Ouija board, people will oftentimes say things like it have existed for years and centuries, and although this is true, the Ouija board was the first one to look like a Ouija board. Because somebody who wanted to make money off of this growing fad was able to consolidate other practices to be able to be sold in a box and sold at $1.50 a pop, which is about $42 by today's money. However, with this, it showed a greater audience and the rest of the world at large that there was a market for this type of service to be granted to people, typically the white, wealthy, and well-to-do, to hire people for certain party events, to conjure the dead and speak with them. And this is what became the later modern spiritualism period, which is how we have the most abundant form of spiritualism, which is Victorian spiritualism, because at this point it hopped across the ocean and became a huge part of Victorian UK. Did you know that Harry Houdini was actually a huge spiritualist debunker? This was something that he did in his spare time, and in traveling around doing his shows, he would actually crash parlor trick events and debunk these greater spiritualist get-togethers. He spent time going under aliases when he was in other towns to crash these parties and show all of the world that these people were frauds, con artists, and that their practices were full of shit. Because even though there was a very real practice that inspired the methods that these spiritualists were using, it did become removed from those practices because money became more important in order to survive in a very trying time in world history. So all of the mysticism became more of a stage performance than it actually was anything mystical or magical. And I fear that is exactly what is happening in many instances with these Patreon accounts and with all of these people that are trying to make money off of witchcraft and spiritual services. Now, do not get me wrong, I don't want to instill an inherent disbelief in my viewers to believe that the people who are actually trying to make money and get by off of the skills that they have cultivated as a part of their spiritual practice, there's no reason to inherently distrust those people. But I do not want to be a part of history repeating itself. Spending enough time researching history, one may come to the conclusion that humans haven't changed much at all, because a lot of the same things that we wind up going through eventually will happen again when similar circumstances arise. And for better or worse, courtesy of social media, specifically the things that fall under the witch talk hashtag, social media has sort of set a precedent to let the greater market know that witchcraft is a lucrative endeavor to be able to put money into, put on store shelves, and people will buy it up because now it is a part of the very real, living, thriving pop culture zeitgeist. So now you have a whole bunch of people that are also now aware of the fact that there is a market for these types of services, and there are people who have definitely spent the time cultivating their skills, cultivating their craft, actually taking the time to develop their mediumship skills. But the people that are successful at this in great multitudes wind up being not so favorable. Before my words can be minced and spliced, what I mean by that is scam artists are on the rise again. So all of the speculations that have existed about witches and spiritualists and psychic mediums since the beginning of the spiritualist movement is all starting to be resurrected once again because the ne'er-do-wells and the people who do not have anything other than their pocketbooks in mind are definitely starting to saturate the market. All of this just to say, I don't want any part of this. I would be removing myself from the things that I know and the way that I know to go about things to reshape everything that I do in order to fit a money-making blueprint that is now being dominated by people that do not actually have the same commitment or passion for the things that I'm into and are making demonstrably more money than I am when my voice is going to be drowned out in the long run because they have more money to put forth into more advertisement and da-da-da-da-da-da, the list goes on. I would much rather stick to what I'm doing here and finding things that I am interested in and finding a way to use those interests as a jumping point to share information and info dump while at the same time just going, please consider the thingy. This thingy is one of the ways that I survive. And although it might make me seem a little bit like one of these scam artists here, I'm not pulling your arm. I'm just hoping that the way that I present information is something that you find enjoyable enough to help keep food in my mouth and a roof over my head. Which equates me much more to a street performer hoping somebody's going to throw some coin my way, which is a lot less beneficial in the long run. But you know what? I like doing this a lot better because the conscience is not as plagued by the woes of doing things that way. And on top of that, for completely personal reasons, I would not want to take something that is one of my hyperfixations, the things that I am passionate about, this area of study and expertise that I have been spending the greatest part of my life obsessing over and pouring hours and hours of research over and turning it into my business. And if I were to do this, I would wind up wringing myself out, squeezing myself dry of any sort of creative passion to actually put forth the effort to make good content that I like making and others like seeing, and I would burn myself out and I would come to hate the things that get me up in the morning. Sometimes research and diving headfirst into these topics is the only reason I crawl out of bed in the morning, and I do not want to take away from myself and ruin the entire experience by turning it into an excuse to make money more than it is to share the things I love with others. And that's what I really try to do, is take what I love and with all of the passion that I have, show you why I love these things so much. And that model of trying to build an audience, trying to make content, to curate a clientele base, and funnel them into my Etsy and funnel them into my Patreon just is not something I want to do. And again, I want to make it explicitly clear. If this is something you do, more power to you. Turning one's practice and craft into a way to make money in order to get by is incredibly valid, and it is something that people have been doing for a very, 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 very long time. Do not feel that there's anything wrong with this. What is wrong with it is when it is removed and becomes a money-making machine more than it is making money off of the things that you love. And I don't want to apply my point of view to anybody else. This is just why I am not doing things that way. Alright, if you're still here, thanks for listening. As always, take care and much love.